Welcome to Behind the Mirror, a place where students on an online program can have the experience of learning all the little things you only get by sitting behind the mirror with a professor. Today I have Deb Dana, who is, as some have called her, the Pied Piper of Polyvagal Theory. I'm so excited to have her on today. Um, and I want to dive in so deep with all the stuff you have to offer. Um, and I feel like for you, the best place to start is to give us a little introduction about yourself and then tell us what is polyvagal theory as like in very broad strokes.
Okay, sounds good. I'm happy to be here with you and happy to share my passion for polyvagal. I am a clinical social worker, and I've been working with polyvagal since I read Stephen Porges's book in 2011, and it was as if a missing piece of the way I work came into place. And so then I invited Steve to come and present to our group. He and his wife Sue Carter came and did a 2-day workshop, and we've been
Wow, you had both of them come.
both of them. They're wonderful. Yeah, yeah. And we've just been collaborating ever since, which is wonderful. And he says he's a scientist, and he developed polyvagal theory, which is an elegant theory of understanding how the autonomic nervous system works. And he was delighted to have me take his work and bring it into clinical application for the everyday therapist who's going to sit across from a client and be engaged with that client's nervous system. So that's where I come from and where I am now. And my book was just published recently, and it's lovely because I get emails from people most every day saying that they're using some of the exercises in the book and understanding the theory in new ways. And what I like best is when they say, yes, it's helping me with my clients, but I'm understanding myself in new ways. And that really is the gift of really understanding how your nervous system works. So maybe we'll dive into polyvagal at this point. You want to do that?
Yeah, I want to touch base on something you said because I had the
Sure.
exact same experience when
Yeah.
I caught when I don't know how. I think maybe through some PESI
Mm-hmm.
um, CE. I was listening and I stumbled onto polyvagal theory, and
Mm-hmm.
suddenly it was like that light bulb moment where you're like,
Yeah.
wait.
Yeah.
Um, and for me, what was so powerful was I felt like we as psychotherapists have been glancing over the broad strokes of this for a long time, but the
Mm-hmm.
theory really dove into the micro moves of the
Mm.
science of safety.
Right.
Um,
Right. Right.
and
Yeah.
once you have that sort of micro level, you can. I feel like it's much more
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
applicable. You're much more able to work with it.
Yeah. 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 I think for many of us, and for our colleagues and your students, um, a lot of polyvagal theory and understanding it is not doing something new for them, but it's putting the science underneath what we're already doing so that we can do it more skillfully and let our clients know here's why we're doing something in the way we're doing it. So yeah, the science of connection. I like to call it the science of feeling safe enough to fall in love with life and take the risks of living. So
That's really appropriate. That's really
yeah,
good.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
really good. That's really
So
good.
so Steve writes and writes in scientific ways, and I like to take his work and make it sort of user friendly. So if we think about polyvagal, we think there are three organizing principles to polyvagal theory. There's hierarchy, neuroception, and co-regulation. And once you get those three principles, you're good to go. So if we
Can I ask you a question?
sure.
Because I think that what you're talking about is so important. I want to make sure people really understand
Mm-hmm.
why it's so important. I
Mm-hmm.
think it'd be so easy, almost like there's a movie that I love called the Prestige, and one of the big ideas is that something that's incredible can be
Mm-hmm.
really easily overlooked if you don't
Mm-hmm.
really show why it is so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
So before you dive into it,
Mm-hmm.
could you talk a little bit about the problem and maybe like fear and not the lack of feeling safe.
Hmm. Hmm. Sure. So the autonomic nervous system is the foundation for all of our lived experience. So it is the platform that everything we do sits on top of. So understanding that is a key to understanding sort of how we move through the world. And we move through the world in these cycles of engagement and mobilization and disconnection. And we do that over and over during our day in either nuanced ways or in extreme ways. And the nervous system is what sends us the message we're either safe or not safe. And well-being, health, growth, and restoration is all about feeling an embodied sense of safety. And our because we're humans, our nervous system is longing to feel safe with another nervous system. So we are meant to feel safe with another person, not just safe in our body on our own, but that and with another person. We need human connection. Steve says connection is a biological imperative, which means that we don't survive without it. And we know that babies come into the world, they have to be met and cared for. And the early studies on the Romanian orphanages showed just what happened when basic needs were cared for, but there wasn't human connection, and the intense impact of that to human lives. And then,
I'm so glad
mm,
that you brought that up. Can you talk a little bit
mm,
more about that? The Romanian, because I think that's a perfect picture
yeah,
for what the problem is.
yeah, because those children were cared for in the concrete ways, so they were fed, they had a bed, they had clothes, they were changed, but there was no predictable, ongoing, warm human contact. And so their systems, if we start with the nervous system, their nervous system was not tuned or shaped to look for connection because that connection was not there. And when connection is not predictably and safely present, our nervous system learns how to live in protection rather than connection. And then we could take that. Once your nervous system has these patterns, then you can take that into the attachment world, right? You create an attachment style out of that. But at the foundation, it's your nervous system creating these habitual response patterns that either allow you to feel safe with others and look for connection, or shut that down. And so what we know is that the nervous system is tuned by experience, right? And so the hopeful news is because of that, we know it can be retuned by experience as well. But the research on the early childhood longing and missing connection is pretty profound. There are these windows of time that we really need to have connection with others for our brains and bodies to develop. Yeah,
So
yeah.
so what happened to those orphans without that tuning from that other nervous system?
Well, you and we see this in our clients now, maybe not so intensely, but trauma survivors who come from families where connection was either non-existent because there was neglect, or a caregiver who was able to be present for a number of reasons: substance, mental illness, their own trauma history, or live in situations where connection is actually dangerous. The person is dangerous, their caregiver. We see that in these clients too. I work with adults, so when those adult clients come to me, their systems, although they probably have found a way to, navigate the world in ways that help them at least sustain the basics of a life. Their systems are tuned to look for danger and can't take in safety. And what we need, our systems are very attuned to cues of danger, but we also have to look for cues of safety. And so helping these clients reshape their systems so that they can actually look for cues of safety and then take them in is the work of recovery and healing. The research on loneliness is pretty astounding, in that it's not actual concrete loneliness. It's a person's perception of loneliness that is what matters. So, I could be surrounded by lots of people, but if my perception is I'm alone, my nervous system and my biology responds to that in difficult ways. So, it's and we live in a society where so many people are lonely.
Yeah.
Yeah. We talk. There's a difference between social support and social connection, right? We can have lots of social support, but not feel social connection. And your nervous system is looking for connection. Your other parts, you might be looking for support, but your nervous system needs that connection, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I see this. I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is without that felt sense of safety,
Mm-hmm.
that's when we see all these trauma symptoms, right? People who are chronically
Mm-hmm.
in and out of hospitals for mental health issues,
Yeah.
people who are numbing via drugs,
Mm-hmm.
people who kids who are throwing tantrums, like that's what we're
Right.
seeing.
Right. So what you're seeing are dysregulated nervous
Yeah.
systems, right? And the thing we want to remember, that when we work with people and even in our own lives, all behaviors are in service of survival, right? So as crazy as the behavior looks, your nervous system is attempting to help you survive, right? So drugging, drinking, food issues, any kind of addictions, kids tantruming, these are all nervous systems that are trying to come into regulation and can't quite get there,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Yeah.
No, I love how you said that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's so good, and I think that for me that shift was so powerful. I work with so many really good um, people
Mm-hmm.
in throughout my career,
Mm-hmm.
and but one of the things that's bugged me about a small part of what they say is they say people are illogical. People do these things that don't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Why does this kid do X when we told them to do Y?
Right.
And and I think that they don't understand that the
Right.
logic of our behaviors is survival,
Right.
right?
It's all about survival.
And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
immediate survival. It's not long
Yeah.
term. What's going to
Right.
give me this
Yep.
grade? It's how am I going to get attention now? How am I going to get food now? How
Right.
am I going to get whatever now?
Right. Right. Because, which might take us into talking about the hierarchy, which is this first important thing to understand about polyvagal, is that when we're in, we have three states. Our autonomic nervous system has three states. What we're saying is when we're in what we call a ventral vagal state, when the ventral vagal part of our parasympathetic nervous system is online and in charge, then we can look ahead. We can consider, oh, I study now to get the grade, or, I want to be in connection, and I can be planful and organized and reach out and offer support. But when there's a challenge that my nervous system can't meet, then the next place I go is to this sympathetic fight, flight, mobilization space. And once I leave ventral and go to sympathetic, I don't care about relationship any longer. It truly is about survival in this moment. And so I sacrifice social engagement for survival.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And then the third state, and this is what, Steve really discovered when he developed polyvagal theory, the third state is this other aspect of parasympathetic, which is called dorsal vagal. And that's that state of collapse, of shutdown, of your body systems. Everything slows, and in our clients, we feel it as despair or hopelessness or lack of purpose, even dissociation. So it's that shutdown. And again, your nervous system has taken you to that place so that you can survive whatever is happening that feels unsurvivable, as if you can't escape. And if you can't escape, your body takes you into collapse, shutdown for survival, right? So again, that makes sense. And you think about kids, the kid who's sympathetically activated and acting out gets attention, right? May not be the right kind of attention. It may have those questions of why are they doing that? Well, because they're biologically unable to do something else, right? But it's the kid who sometimes is invisible and under the radar, that, I always worry when a teacher says, oh yeah, never have a problem with him, always quiet, always doing his work, because my antenna is saying, is he really present, or is he in a dorsal vagal state of collapse that is easier to manage because the system's not asking for anything,
Yeah.
right? It's shut
Yeah.
down, it's quiet. So, and dorsal vagal collapse is the most terrifying place for a human body to be.
Yeah, you're bringing up some own stuff. I did in-home therapy for about a year.
Mm-hmm.
My very first kid was in. So the
Mm-hmm.
way that I think about it is you have play,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have fight or flight, and then you have
Mm-hmm.
freeze. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the hierarchy. It's a simplified version.
Yeah, so
And
instead of play, let's just call it social connection.
social connection. Yeah.
And then we have fight flight, and then you could say freeze, or it might be easier for people to think about as collapse, or
Collapse. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And this kid that I had, he was
Mm-hmm.
quiet. He would
Mm-hmm.
just go outside and just dig in the dirt for hours. Foster
Mm-hmm.
parents, oh, he's not a problem.
Right,
And then
right.
every once in a while, he would
Mm-hmm.
go into
Have
fight
an
or flight.
outburst.
He would,
Yep, yep.
and then they would be like, I don't understand this kid, and I was just like, and I got
Mm-hmm.
frustrated, and I didn't really know what was going on. And
Mm-hmm.
looking back, I mean, that's probably
Right,
one of the moments I regret the most because I'm like, that kid really needed help, and I had no idea how to help him.
right, right. So if we look back at that kid now and we track his nervous system through this hierarchy, and in my work with clients, I created the ladder, I put it on the ladder so
Hmm.
that it's, safe and social, fight, flight, collapse at the bottom. If he's in
Safe and
collapse,
social, yeah, I love that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if he's in collapse at the bottom of the ladder, and every now and then his nervous system, because we're always trying to get to the top,
Right.
and every now and then his nervous system gives a sympathetic surge to get me out of this place that feels so despairing and hopeless. And then that's that acting out fight flight that happens.
Yeah.
And if there's nobody there to hold him and say, oh, yes, let's keep going up to the top of the ladder, back to engagement, he goes back to collapse. And that's that feedback loop that we see so often in kids and in our adult clients. They're immobilized, and then they have a sympathetic surge, and then they go back to immobilization. And so it's that loop that happens. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's so true. That
And
that
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 loop.
bounce between collapse and fight,
Mm-hmm,
collapse and fight, collapse and fight. Yeah.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and in the clinical world, you can you could see people get diagnosed, right? That's a borderline, features, right? Because
Yeah.
you're yes, 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 no, yes, 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 no, and really it's a nervous system that just is, because our nervous systems are longing to get to ventral vagal, to safe and social. They're just longing to get there, and so they keep trying, and without some help to continue through sympathetic back to safe and social, that feedback loop happens. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So that's
yeah.
hierarchy.
That's hierarchy. So then the second organizing principle is neuroception. And
Oh, I'm so glad we're
neuroception,
talking about this now.
okay. So neuroception is the term that Steve created because there was no word that described this experience of the nervous system. Perception involves the thinking parts of our brain, and the nervous system is subcortical, right? So it's from the brainstem down. So he had to come up with a word. So neuroception is the word that he coined, which is a great word. And neuroception, I like to think about it, is the nervous system is looking inside, so is feeling what's happening inside our body. Outside, it's taking in the environment, and between. So it's taking in between two nervous systems. So you just think inside, outside, between. And those are the three places that your nervous system is always getting cues of safety and danger. So neuroception is happening, and we feel the outcome of neuroception, right? So we feel what
So we don't
happens,
perceive it; we just feel the outcome of it. It's its
right?
own thing.
Right. And then, in order to be able to do something with it, we bring perception to that neuroception so that we can then become aware of it and bring curiosity to it. Because otherwise, neuroception is always running in the background. So at the moment, for the three of us, it is just every single micro moment is taking in information. But it's when there's a shift that happens and we bring attention to it that we can think, oh, okay, I wonder what the cue of danger was that prompted that, or the cue of safety was that prompted that. So to go back to our clients, this is where, a big part of the work is, what are the cues of danger and what are the cues of safety, right? Because the nervous system, you're right, has to come into a sense of safety in order to be able to be organized and in order for change to happen. In the therapy world, therapy can't happen until there is enough safety in the system for the system to open to the possibility of change. So
Therapy can't happen until there's enough safety?
Right, because, therapy through a polyvagal perspective, then the therapy that's going to happen is for me to help you move back into enough ventral vagal so that your system can regulate enough so that we can come out of a pattern of protection and do some work, right? Because if you're,
doesn't that imply that the bulk of therapy is emotional regulation?
autonomic regulation, which then, because, if we think about it, the other thing I wanted to say is your autonomic state, because 80% of the information of the vagus nerve, so of your parasympathetic nervous system, 80% is coming from your body to the brain, and 20% is coming back from your brain to your body. So your autonomic state creates your psychological story. Okay, so if you're in a sympathetic fight-flight, your story is going to be one of survival and protection in a certain way. From dorsal vagal, the very same experience, the story is going to be a different story. And then from ventral, the very same experience, the story, there becomes possibilities for the story to change. So, in my way of doing therapy now through a polyvagal guided approach, it really is about helping to bring flexibility back to the nervous system so that we can move through these states, not get stuck, because trauma survivors are stuck in a dysregulated state, and they can't get out of it to come back to regulation. So the beginning work is helping the system become flexible again, right?
And then when they are able to, ascend the ladder back to safe and social, that's when the possibilities in their trauma history open up to something else.
Right.
Otherwise, they're just locked.
They're locked in a story, right? And the story recreates itself over and over. Absolutely. Yeah. So that's neuroception, and neuroception is powerful, really powerful. And it's, my nervous system is, even though we're on, we're not in the same room, but we get signals from each other. My nervous system is taking in signals from your voice and, your head movements and your face and your smile, right? That's how our nervous systems communicate, right? So we can communicate across distance without ever having met each other. We had some time before we started and sort of created an autonomic connection there. We had some attunement that happened first so that we can feel comfortable with each other. This is what nervous systems want, right? Long to be, are wired to be in connection with other nervous systems. Yeah, and trauma, impacts that ability, right? Yeah.
Have you ever met someone who you felt like was just a natural at that?
Yeah. That connection, yeah.
Like you just talk to them, you're just like, oh my gosh, why am I crying right now?
It's interesting because what you're speaking for is your nervous system feels totally safe and connected to their nervous system, and they're able to extend this ventral vagal energy, this surround you in ventral vagal, so that you're welcomed in to, talk or have experiences or reflect or whatever. That's the mark for me, that's the mark of a wonderful therapist, right?
Yeah.
That create that safety and presence right away. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. For trauma survivors, as a trauma specialist, I think that is a key skill for therapists, is to send that autonomic message in the first moments of mating, right? Because a trauma survivor's nervous system is on guard and exquisitely tuned to look for cues of danger, and so when met with an open, welcoming, regulated system, which is our job, to be regulated and regulating for others, the nervous system can then feel welcomed in, and you have a chance then to create a relationship and do some other work. So, and if you're having a
how do you train that?
well, this is my I guess my bias is that, we learn polyvagal theory from the inside out, I like to say. You really have to get to know your own nervous system and be able to track where you are on the hierarchy and bring perception to your neuroception in each moment, and then use that, because it is your responsibility as a therapist to be regulated. But I think it's our responsibility as humans to understand our systems and to be able to regulate them, and help others regulate. I was teaching a week ago, and I said we can change the world one nervous system at a time, which is really what I believe.
Yeah.
When I'm regulated and can bring that, offer that to another person, their nervous system feels it and they begin to regulate, right? So, which is the third organizing principle, if we just name it here, co-regulation.
Yeah.
That's
So
what
hierarchy,
mm-hmm,
neuroception, co-regulation.
co-regulation. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, yeah, and it's a big, that's a big responsibility to be responsible, to be regulated and offer regulating energy to another. That is the responsibility we take on as therapists. I think that's the responsibility we take on as parents, right? That's our job to offer that to our children. Teachers take it on. I mean, really everywhere in the world where you're connecting with another, and there's someone is offering a service to another. It's their job to be regulated and regulating. And in order to do that, you have to understand how your nervous system works.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's a mystery.
I think that is just a perfect picture, because as soon as you said that, I thought of all the service people I've worked with
Mm-hmm.
who just drove me up the wall,
Mm-hmm.
and it's because of that, right? Like when we
Mm-hmm.
talk about good customer service,
Right.
we're
Right.
talking about that safe and social,
Right.
and when they aren't,
Mm-hmm.
even if they give us what they told us they were going to give us,
Mm-hmm.
we are still like that's not it. I don't like them. I'm not going to tip, like whatever it is, right?
Right. Right.
But that waiter, that lady at the office, that
Mm-hmm.
coach who was
Mm-hmm.
tuned in to
Mm-hmm.
you,
Mm-hmm.
despite however you were performing or how much you paid or you forgot to tip or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, when
Mm-hmm.
those are the people who we remember and we say, oh
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
coach changed my life. That
Right.
teacher spoke
Right.
to me. Yeah.
Right. Right. So if we look at it through your biology, that person was able to, offer your nervous system a sense of safety and connection, right? And no matter what, if you were dysregulated, there was that ongoing, predictable sense of safety coming at you, and which helped you regulate back again, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that it really does shape your system. These ongoing experiences shape our system, which again is, when you think about the experiences people have regularly in their lives, they're being shaped, and not always in the way that we think would be the positive
Right.
shaping, right?
Right.
People who live in big cities where there's lots of noise and people don't connect, and it's hustle and bustle. The nervous system is taking that on, right?
Yeah.
In my part of the world, rural Maine, where there are people who live in isolation, that's the opposite problem, right? Feeling the longing that can't be met by connection. So, you know, yeah.
Something you said a second ago really struck me, and I wish I had written it down. And I think it was just that, um, just that image that like we are all. Oh, this is what it was. It
Mm-hmm.
was that with what you are doing,
Mm-hmm.
when you can bring perception to neuroception, right? When you can bring
Mm-hmm.
thought to how we are tuning each other's
Mm-hmm.
bodies to feel
Mm-hmm.
safe or not feel safe,
Right.
it sounds like that gives us an unprecedented level of control and direction over it now.
Mm-hmm.
Is that off?
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I was thinking about my own situation, and we are not always in ventral. We're not always in that safe and social place. We all get dysregulated, and there are times when I try to bring a sense of humor to it. But I was standing in the kitchen the other day, and life was just getting a little out of control, and I knew it was, and I could feel my system dysregulating. But in the moment, it's like, nope, I can see it happening, and I can't find the resource. So what I told myself was, okay, the ventral vagal train is leaving the station, and I'm not on it. I'm not on it, right? And it happens to everybody. So what I think we're talking about is noticing these ruptures and making a repair,
Hmm.
right? Because these ruptures happen all the time, but if we come back and make the repair, then I think we build relationship even more strongly. So the expectation is not to be perfect at this or always be regulated. The expectation is to notice when I'm fall out of regulation and come back and make the repair with whoever it was that I had the rupture with, right? That's again the responsibility, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like my students are going to ask, so how does this relate to attachment theory?
Hmm.
I think they're going to say it sounds very similar. So,
Hmm. Yeah. So Steve had a beautiful quote in one of his interviews. He said that he considers the nervous system is the preamble to attachment. So, and nowadays I feel like a broken record. I keep telling people the nervous system is the foundation, the platform that sits under everything. So, I work with a lot of clinicians who are trained in, all of the alphabet soup that we get trained in, right? And, I keep saying polyvagal is not in competition with any of those. It's the platform underneath them, and they just make you understand why those models work, and they help you shift a bit of those models to bring a little more of the what the nervous system needs, right? So for attachment, when met, because secure attachment is about feeling safe, seen, and soothed, right? If we put it very simply, safe, seen, and soothed, which is an experience of two nervous systems being in regulation together, right? So it's safe and social being two nervous systems, or if I'm a little one and I just have a system that can hold me and can help me regulate again, that creates secure attachment, right? If we think about the insecure categories, whether it's anxious or ambivalent. If we take anxious, I usually think of anxious as having a more mobilized flavor in the system. So for me, I might map it more to a sympathetic drivenness, neediness to have connection, and then ambivalent, more of the flavor of a dorsal disconnect, right? And then the disorganized category, again, I think would be this system that fluctuates between sympathetic, dorsal. So that would be sort of my shorthand for how I would equate it to
okay.
attachment, right?
So the
Yeah.
attachment is more about the relationship and the bonds, and
Mm.
the polyvagal is describing what's happening in those interactions.
Right. And yes. And, if attachment is about the relationship, polyvagal, your state has these emergent properties that support certain kinds of connection. So from sympathetic, the emergent properties are those of survival and fight, flight, and mobilization. And when I'm in a sympathetically charged state, if you have a neutral face, I perceive you as dangerous.
Right.
Right. So if you're a therapist or a parent or wanting to extend an invitation to others, your face has to be mobile,
Right.
because a neutral face is like, oh my God, you're now a threat. The question we're always asking ourselves when we're working with clients, and so we could ask the same parents, teachers, anybody, am I being perceived as a restorative resource or a threat? right? Because the nervous system is either seeing me as safe and resourcing, or I'm a threat, right? So, yeah,
How do you
yeah.
talk to people about this? I feel like one of the things that I bump up against is people will say,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, but they're choosing to see me that way." And
Mm-hmm.
from my understanding of this science, part
Mm-hmm.
of what we're saying is when someone's body is
Mm-hmm.
telling them
Mm-hmm.
that they are under attack, that
Mm-hmm.
they either need to fight their way out or run
Mm-hmm.
away,
Mm-hmm.
the options to their actual thinking process are very,
Right.
very limited.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes.
So
Right. So
conveying that
people.
to another practitioner, I mean, how do you?
Well, I usually, will have practitioners do simple exercises, so that they get the feeling in their body of, um, oh, I might have wanted to connect in this way, but my nervous system totally would not allow that. In couples work, when you get the couples to understand that it's not that he wants to not show up for you, it's that he biologically is unavailable to show up for you because his biology has taken him to a different place. In sympathetic, we cannot do this, right? And in dorsal vagal, we absolutely can't do this because we are just so shut down, right? So helping people understand that because the nervous system doesn't make meaning and doesn't assign motive. Our brains do that, right? The nervous system is simply acting in response to neuroception to help you survive. But then we make meaning of it, right? You you didn't you said I can't have this conversation right now and you left. So I make meaning you don't want to be with me, but really if I can look at you as a dysregulated nervous system, your nervous system said I can't do this right now. Right? It's not your brain, it's your nervous system that said, no, this is not possible right now. Not that I don't want to, it's not possible. So, finding these lovely ways to help clinicians have personal experiences um, is what my workshops are all about. Because once you feel it in your own system, then you get it, right?
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful way to kind of tap into that, and I think that also feeds back onto I think a core message is it's the felt sense that creates the change. So if you can have the
Mm-hmm,
felt sense
mm-hmm,
of this is what it feels like, that's
mm-hmm.
of course going to eliminate for you what is going on for your clients.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Right. And I really think, one of the watchwords, I think, in therapy, becoming a good therapist, is we never ask our clients to do something we haven't tried out, right? And so, therapists really need to map their own systems and play around with this and have the experience of feeling met and not met, of tracking cues of danger and safety so that they really, when they're sitting across from a client, when I sit across from my clients and somebody goes to a dorsal state, I can truly say, wow, I get this. I absolutely know. And when I tell them I'm an expert dorsal vagal disconnector, that is that's my, we all have if you guys think about your own growing up, we all have, what I call a neural profile, an autonomic profile, and so my go-to, because of my family system growing up, my go-to was to become invisible under the radar. So that dorsal flavor, and other people are much more sympathetically charged. Their place was to get big and act out. So if you think about your system and you think, which is my flavor, when am I more sympathetic or dorsal, and that's a good place to start, but my clients, when they go to dorsal, I say, oh, I so know where you are because um, my system knows how to do that, and so my system also knows how to help you get out of that, right? And that's that sense. So once you know your own system, you can really bring that authentically, and your confidence in telling your client, I get where you are, and I also know that we can come out of it together, is believable to their nervous system, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So what is your work now? I mean, are you doing a lot more? I thought I heard that you were working with Steve on like developing a model or something, or
Oh, Steve, no, no, Steve would not be doing that. It's so fascinating. Steve is so clear. He developed a theory, and he specifically did not develop a model because he is not a clinician. And he developed a theory, which I so love, because what he wants is other people to then take polyvagal theory and apply it in the ways that they find creative. So even when I teach, and I know my mission right now, I know it sounds crazy, but my mission is to help as many people in the world understand polyvagal so that they can, understand how they're moving through the world and impacting others. And when I go and teach and I share my particular worksheets and ways of doing it, and say, it's free to use. Go, use, create, do. Um, I do have. It's funny. I have bullet points. I don't have steps. I have bullet points that
mm-hmm.
because I do demos. It's a beautiful way to polyvagal theory guided therapy approach is beautiful and is powerful in bringing change to people, and it's very gentle because I don't have to know the story, the story. We're just learning the story of the nervous system and helping the nervous system reshape in some way. So it's a lovely way to do trauma work. And I have sort of these 7 sort of bullet points. This sort of is where you're working when you do this. And people keep saying, but you got to create a model. I said, no, it's an approach, right? And here's sort of the broad outline, because once you understand the theory, then you're free to help the nervous system, right? And you'll find your own way to do it. So, I guess to come back to your question, what I really want is to, I'm getting invitations to go teach multi-day workshops places, and that's what I love doing, because then when I leave, I know there are 22 or 40 or 60 more clinicians who are taking it back to their practices, and they're going to talk to their colleagues, and it's rippling out into the world. So that's what I'm doing. Steve created the Traumatic Stress Research Consortium out of Indiana University, the Kinsey Institute, and I'm the coordinator of the consortium. And our mission is to gather 1,000 clinicians worldwide to take part in clinician surveys, because the first thing we want to know is who are the clinicians who work with trauma, what are our histories, what are our what are our training, who are we, to get that information, and then from those 1,000 clinicians gather 10,000 clients to get the client experience of using certain scales that Steve and the team is creating around body perception and autonomic state, and some of the more general trauma questionnaires, to really get a huge data collection on trauma and how it impacts people's lives. So that's the project that's going on at the moment. And if anybody is interested in joining the consortium, you can just send an email to trauma@indiana.edu, and you get me on the other end, and I'll send you a link to register with the consortium. So
Awesome.
it's a pretty awesome project. Yeah, the team is also working on ways to capture autonomic state, like through your webcam and my webcam. So in real time, we could be understanding what our nervous systems are doing. Uh,
Wow.
they can do it in the lab right now.
They
So
can.
in still pictures, they've been able to do it in the lab. So it's in process.
Huh.
The other piece is, because you're recording this, is to take a piece of voice recording, and they're brilliant scientists at the consortium. I got to say, they've created algorithms so they can take that piece of voice recording and track the nervous system state through that piece of voice. I know, I know,
Oh
quite
my
fascinating.
gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
I need a second to
Uh-huh.
black
Yeah,
out
that
because that's like that's stupid crazy. That is stupid. People don't. I don't think people listening to this know what that implies.
Mm,
Like
mm,
that level of tech is Wow.
I know.
Wow.
I know.
That is
I
next level
love that you're
stuff.
having that response. Yes, it's beautiful. Yeah.
That is
So,
like that
you know,
is
down the road, and you know, it's probably a couple years out, but you know, I think the dream is to have it someday be an app that people just use, and you know, in therapy, we could have it, you know, running while we're working and see what's happening, and there's all sorts of applications. So,
see this is oh my gosh. So this is why this fascinates me.
hmm
Well, there are 20 different reasons why this fascinates me. Um,
I love your passion.
can I tell you a little bit of my own story, like just a snippet?
Yeah, please.
So basically, I was trained in a brief systemic model,
Hmm.
right? So we're talking about, the solution focused guys, a lot of
Hmm.
Milton Erickson stuff, some
Hmm.
strategic stuff.
Hmm.
And one of the things I found was that all of these models worked, but none of them worked consistently.
Hmm. Hmm.
And what I eventually came to was a deep realization that the difference between when they work and when they don't is the science of safety. How safe and receptive the
Hmm.
client feels
Hmm.
determines
Right,
how well these things work.
right, right.
And so, one of the things that I'm hearing when you talk about this is we are very close to
Hmm.
having a way to monitor that, which means that outcomes in psychotherapy would just skyrocket because we will be able to tell
Hmm.
where the
Hmm.
therapist is, if the
Hmm.
therapist is making an impact with the client,
Hmm. Hmm.
how to train therapists,
Hmm.
and they can get real time feedback on where
Right,
they are,
right.
um, which of
Yeah.
course is just going to make for people who want to engage in that,
Hmm.
having that
Hmm.
sort of concrete feedback would allow their practice and their ability to help people just
Right,
skyrocket.
right. Yeah, absolutely. And then once you get that concrete feedback, you understand better why some of the things you do work and don't work. So,
Exactly.
you know,
And
even if
and
people,
you get around the other problem of having, because sometimes my clients are really nice people,
hmm,
so they want to save me half the time. And
oh
so
boy,
even if something doesn't work, they're just, oh no, no, I that
hmm,
and it's
hmm,
like, no, that actually didn't work for you, but don't want
right,
to make me feel like I'm a failure.
right.
But if you are able to look at some of this stuff in a more concrete way, I mean, yeah,
Mm-hmm. And for, you know, for your, maybe for your clients, I know for my clients, having that, you know, real time feedback that says, yes, what you're experiencing inside is being measured out here and matches, because for many trauma survivors, what they're told is what you're feeling inside, what your nervous system is doing, is not true, right? What you're feeling is really not what's happening out here. You know, what you're seeing is not happening. So it skews neuroception. Neuroception gets you know, calibrated wrong. And so if you could see it, you say, oh yeah, you're feeling a cue of danger from me, and your nervous system is absolutely
right,
right. And then we can figure out, what was that cue of danger, right? You know, something I said, the way I looked, something, a way I moved, a
yeah,
sound in the
yeah,
room, right? Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
That is so true as well. I mean,
Mm.
I learned this word from my sister not too long ago called gaslighting.
Oh yeah.
And that's what you're talking
Yeah.
about. We're able
Yeah.
to undo the gaslighting that we
Right.
unintentionally do to trauma survivors.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We can
Yeah.
tell them that yes, what you're seeing and feeling, perceiving
Mm-hmm.
is actually like your body
Mm-hmm.
picking up on something. Let's figure out
So,
what that was.
right. And let's figure out, you know, the discernment piece is, let's figure out, okay, so your body, there's a neuroception of danger that happened and your body responded. If we bring perception to that, you know, is it necessary in this moment, in this place, between you and me? Or is it happening out of a familiar pattern from your past?
Right.
Right? And that's where we begin to do that discerning piece,
Gosh.
right? Because the nervous system learned that this particular thing was a cue of danger, and now it can begin to you can begin to say, okay, but maybe in this moment it doesn't need to activate in the same way, right?
Yeah.
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 Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hmm.
I had a
Yeah.
friend who I would raise my eyebrow
Yeah, there you go.
And it
There you
would
go.
just send
Is
her
it cue
off.
danger? Yeah,
She
sure.
would lose her mind. And
Right,
you know, and
right.
it was one of those things that for the longest time she did not know what it was, right?
Exactly. She would just have this
Have this reaction.
intense
Yeah.
response, which makes no sense. And that's the other thing about really tracking the nervous system. It begins to make sense, which is so helpful for we humans. We don't feel crazy. It's like, I have no idea why that's happening. Now I know why it's happening. And once you know why something's happening, then you have a chance at reshaping it. Right? But until you can track it, you don't have a prayer of reshaping it. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, is there a way to do, like, I don't know how to say this, but are there opposite things that happen? Like, do we have intense feelings of safety from other cues?
Hmm.
We
Absolutely.
do.
Absolutely. Yeah. If and you might think of something in your life that feels like a cue of safety. For me, um, I have an environmental cue of safety. For me, I know can predictably come into a sense of real well-being when I go to the beach, and I live like 3 minutes from the ocean. So for me, the ocean is a part of my experience of well-being. So that's been wired in over the course of my lifetime. And actually, when I go traveling and I'm away too long from a place where there's no ocean, my system feels it. It's a, oh, take me home to where there's ocean. Yeah. So yeah, we get these other wired in, cues of safety and connection. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Do
And
we?
actually we're trying to find those, and I call those, when in the beginning, when we're working, the triggers are the things that take us to sympathetic or dorsal. And then, because it's so important to also recognize those micro moments of ventral, of safety, I call those glimmers. So we map the triggers, but we also map the glimmers, because those micro moments, if we can keep connecting with those micro moments, begin to add up and shape our system.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Mm.
Are there any innate cues of safety?
The sound of a voice, a prosodic voice, usually within the range of a female, a female voice that's warm and has this lilting quality to it, is built in. So we have, I call them factory installed settings, right? You know, so that is one. Whereas a high pitched squeal is a factory installed setting of a cue of danger. We all look to where's the danger, and then the low rumbles that we feel activate our sense of predator. So it's that life threat. So there are things that the nervous system just responds to because it's wired that way.
Do you,
Yeah. Yeah.
can you, if you could think of someone on TV who you think that
Mm,
person has the safe and social
mm,
voice, like
mm,
who would you say?
mm. Trying to think of the. I don't want to get into the political world. However, um, I was, because of we're having this conversation just after John McCain died. And so there have been a lot of people talking on TV about, how wonderful he is. And for me, Barack Obama was that sense of being in the presence of someone trustworthy and safe, and I could just sink into feeling, oh, everything is going to be okay.
Yeah.
So it's his voice, his mannerisms, that my nervous system just responded to, as saying, oh, there, okay. And I recognized when I was listening today, my nervous system does not feel that anymore, right? And I think many nervous
What
systems in our
changed?
country,
Something's different. Oh yeah.
and I think many nervous systems in our country right now are being bombarded by cues of danger,
Oh well,
right?
that's yes, that's easily
So
true.
So, if you think about it on a nervous system level, we have a collective nervous system that is feeling on edge and dysregulated. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was It's funny you say this. I watched this show called Reverie,
Mm-hmm.
and there's this guy on the show. He's, I don't know, maybe in his early 60s,
Mm-hmm.
older black dude, and he
Mm-hmm.
has this like deep voice.
Ah,
Um,
what was that like for you?
and for me, you were talking about how, how that deep rumble is threat,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and I definitely think that guy's master of his domain. Like he's a very dominant person easily. But
Mm-hmm.
there's also the quality where it feels like, and they play this up on the show where he's like the dad, the
Dad,
tough love
in
dad,
charge. Mm-hmm.
so everyone else knows don't mess with him,
Don't
but
mess
like
with
he
it.
loves
Yeah.
you and he's always gonna fight for you. And so that was
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
anyway. So I was
Yeah.
thinking about that, but I was,
Yeah.
as you were
Yeah.
talking about the other thing, I was thinking of there's a character on Doctor who has
Mm-hmm.
that little. She's a female character, and I think most of these people are.
Mm-hmm.
Who has that lilting,
Yep. Yep.
almost like a. Her songs like music,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
similar to what Dr. King had. I think when,
Yeah.
I mean, his voice
Yes.
was so melodic.
Yes.
I think in that way it
And,
really
yeah.
was
Yeah. And,
mesmerizing, right?
yeah. And that's what the nervous system is looking for. That melodic, prosodic voice. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. We just feel safe around that.
He has
Absolutely.
that now. I was listening
Mm.
to a podcast today. Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Mm.
That's why he makes science interesting.
There you
Because
go.
as he's
There you go.
talking, it's so musical, and you go, yeah, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
protons and photons and whatever. You're just like,
I love it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
That's great. Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of a wonderful thing to understand how the autonomic nervous system works, and then be able to shape it and tone it, and then help others. Steve, I loved his word benevolence. I think benevolence is the active, ongoing use of ventral vagal energy in service of healing. And so I think that's what we aspire to, right? Is to using our ventral vagal energy in service of healing. Yeah.
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 I think what you're saying is so. I had a watershed moment the other day. I was reading this book,
Mm-hmm.
um, and the author, he's a famous tennis coach. He
Mm-hmm.
was talking about how one of the biggest things he's a coach had to overcome was how resistant his players were.
Mm. Ah.
And he would talk about how they would get defensive when he wasn't trying to be attacking.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
had this moment where I realized, unfortunately, 99% of people 99% of people walk around
Mm-hmm.
really afraid, always kind of fending off threats. And I
Mm-hmm.
think what you're talking about is so powerful because to give someone that gift of social connection
Mm-hmm.
really is like giving
Mm-hmm.
a thirsty man water. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's just not enough.
Right, right. I liked what you said about resistant, because we therapists, in the past would think about resistant clients, right? Well, a resistant client is simply a client whose nervous system I have not sent enough cues of safety to, right? Their system is just doing what it needs to do to, because it's in a state of danger. So it's my job to find out what are the cues of safety that system needs and send them,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. I
yeah.
think that's true. Well, I
Mm.
want to be respectful of your time. I know that it's very late where you are. I have two more closing questions for you, and then I'll let you get
Sure.
off the
Yeah,
line.
sure. I'm having fun.
My first question for you is, what do you think is on the frontier? Right. I mean, obviously you're on the frontier, but if you were to push it out a little further, what do you think? This is going to be a place people need to be looking.
Mm. Hmm. That's a tough one to answer. Hmm. I don't know. I really, I keep coming back to, I really do think there is incredible power in helping people be able to track their own nervous system. So I guess the frontier for me might be, all sorts of these ways of really attuning to your own nervous system so that you can make an informed decision about what you do next, right? Rather than being hijacked by your system, you can befriend it and work with it, right? So maybe that.
Okay.
Yeah.
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 Is that closely related to a lot of the mindfulness stuff that people are?
Yeah. Interesting. I think mindfulness can interrupt impulse to action, right? When we're mindful, we just don't go from impulse to action. There's a ability for flexibility of thought. And I guess where I want to go is bringing flexibility back to the underlying nervous system so that people don't get pulled into these dysregulated states and get stuck there. Because that is a painful place to be. A dysregulated nervous system is a system that's not resilient, right? And is a system that brings a daily experience of suffering. A rigid system brings daily suffering to people, which, again, because we understand polyvagal theory and we have ways to impact the nervous system and shape the nervous system, it seems like it's an experience that doesn't have to happen, right? We have ways to help people understand and shape their system, and it feels like that's important. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you do any sort of we touched on this before, but I don't think we got very deep into it. Do you do any sort of work with tools? Like, I know Steve has the Safe and Sound protocol. Some people do neuromodulation, other people do neurofeedback. Do you do any?
Feedback. Yeah. I have the Safe and Sound protocol. The listening, Safe and Sound listening equipment. My husband, Bob, had a stroke 3.5 years ago, and so we're doing all sorts of interesting rehab experiments. One of them being, does the Safe and Sound listening protocol help his face become more alive and his social engagement system be more predictably present? And it seems to have some benefit for that. And when I wrote the book, I really was thinking about my colleagues who are simply sitting in an office, and how do we bring our skills to helping regulate a nervous system and then reshape a nervous system simply in this co-regulation and through the cranial nerves of our social engagement system. So even though I'm so curious about all of the inventions and creations that are coming down the road, I'm pretty passionate about helping people be able to just track this way. Yeah.
Okay. Last question. What are you reading now? What's on your nightstand? What's in the bathroom? What's thrown in the back of your car?
I have Irvin Yalom's memoir is at the top of my list right now. I saw him speak at a conference last year, and it was the first time I'd ever seen him in person, and my heart was just filled by
You weren't at the Evolution of Psychotherapy conference, were you?
I was not.
Good.
No.
I would have been mad if you were there and I didn't get to meet you.
No.
I was so mad.
No, but I hope we get to go to a conference and meet each other.
Yeah.
Not to mention, we would have been in the same crowd just crying at the same speech because Irvin Yalom had me going.
That dude's a baller.
Talk about someone who makes you feel safe.
Oh my god.
Absolutely. And who broke all the rules in service of connection with his he'd call them patients, but with his clients, right? You know, he would be real with them and connect with them. It was like, oh, so I had to buy his memoir. So that's at the top of my list. Although you'll laugh because most of what I do is read research articles because I do love reading research articles, and I'm in the process of writing a workbook to go with the first book. So I'm researching more stuff. So yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. What research articles?
Oh, let's see. What was I reading yesterday? Somebody asked me. People ask me questions all the time, and it's like, oh, I don't know, but I'll see if I can find a research article on that. And the one yesterday was about people were talking about music, and there was this research study. I'll just tell you this that used 3 different music pieces: a classical, a hard rock, and then the piece of music was Enya's Only Time, right? And they tracked the response of the nervous system. And Enya's Only Time brought the most increase of ventral vagal energy, even if the person said, I don't like it. Is that not fascinating?
That's awesome.
That was fascinating.
Yeah.
The other one, because a Korean friend who sent this, that the Canadian milk producing whatever, it had a contest. They asked people to compose songs that would help cows give more milk. So we're going to translate into the nervous system. They're helping cows feel safer so that they produce more milk.
What?
And so, yeah, that's fascinating. So I was playing that song to my training group over the weekend.
Yeah.
I said, this song helps cows give more milk. So yeah, my and I don't know if you're like research or not, but you start in one place with a question, and then an hour later you're down the rabbit hole somewhere, and you think, wow, I have no idea how I got here, but it's been a fascinating ride, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Most of my research right now is the reading I have to do for my classes, so I don't have a lot of outside. Because whatever's on the course, I have to make sure that I'm up on.
Right. Well, I have a brain stuffed with random facts from all this research I read. So people will say, there's an interesting research study on fill in the blank, and they kind of look at me and say, I know, I love reading research. So there you go. Yeah.
Well, look, where can people contact you, find you?
On my website is probably the easiest way. I actually have 2, but I'll give you rhythmofregulation.com, all one word, rhythmofregulation.com, and you can find there's a contact request form they can submit and send me emails, ask me questions. Okay. I love it. I get up in the morning and see, who sent me an email overnight. It's such fun. Awesome. I'll just leave you with this last thing. I had a email the other day from a therapist in India. It was so sweet. I had my book. I have no idea how he got my book, but he had my book, and he was going off to a little village in India where he was going to work with a group of people who were being treated for cancer, and he was going to have them use my first map and map their nervous systems to get to know their nervous system. And it was like, that was just amazing, right? Very sweet.
That's awesome.
So yeah.
Wow. Well, look, thank you so much for your time and for
Thank
putting
you
up with
guys.
all the stuff behind the scenes. And
I know we had
have
some fun.
enjoyed it so much.
I have enjoyed it too.
And I hope we do get to meet soon at a conference.
I hope so. We got to get to a conference somewhere together. You have to tell me where you're going, and I'll tell you where I'm going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Great.
Good. Been lovely to meet both of you.
All right. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.